All right, I'd like to welcome back to the asylum Stephanie Cooke, celebrated author, YA author, former editor, if I'm not correct.
Current editor, still too.
Still editor. So juggling many hats, wearing many hats. That's great. So welcome back to the asylum. How has 2021 been for you?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's been pretty great overall. Ongoing pandemic stuff aside, we obviously couldn't have predicted that this would just go on for as long as it has. But, and ideally it would have been nice for books to come out into a world where that wasn't a thing. Right. But we make the most of a bad situation. And I'm still eternally grateful to have had Oh My Gods come out this year, to have Paranorthern come out this year. We did a self-published book with Toronto Comix called Life. So it's been a really incredible year, and I'm really proud of it overall. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've been incredibly busy. I know we spoke not too long ago about Oh My Gods. So let's get into Paranorthern. Sure. What can you tell us about it?
Sure. I've got it right here.
Awesome. Excellent.
So it's Paranorthern and the Chaos Bunny A-hop-calypse. And it's by myself, and then art by Mari Costa, who is just incredible. So basically this is a story for young readers, and four friends accidentally open up a portal to another dimension. This dimension starts spilling out chaos bunnies who aren't like inherently evil. I liken them to Stitch from Lilo and Stitch, where they're just chaotic and they want to cause all the trouble possible, and you shouldn't let them into your world at all costs. So, fearing that Abby is going to get in trouble for this, her and her friends team up to try and find a way to close this portal and send the bunnies back from whence they came and stop the A-hop-calypse. So
it's the A-hop-calypse. Did I get that right?
A-hop-calypse.
A-hop-calypse. Yeah.
Because it's got, again, these little bunnies.
I had a lot of fun reading it. And it was amazing how layered it was. And so if you read it the first time, you can interpret it one way, but then you find out that there's all these themes in it on second reading. And so depending on your age, your sensibility, you can pick a whole bunch of stuff out of it. What was it like crafting the story?
Yeah, this was honestly something that had been in my head for so long. And when I had like my day job and it was just one of those positions that I hated, Paranorthern was kind of my escape. Before I was like writing long form, I was just kind of doing short stories and trying to find my voice. But Paranorthern was this project that I kind of stuck with on the side. And it was like my happy place to kind of like build this world and to have these characters. And I kind of just like didn't know if it was any good or not, because like I didn't talk about it with like a lot of other people. It was just a way for me to have an outlet, like a creative outlet. And yeah, it definitely changed a lot from like its original inception and then to what it is now, from, my agent taking a look at it to us selling it to HMH Kids, now Clarion Books. It's really evolved from that first place. But crafting this world, I knew I wanted to play around with like magic and like magical beings, and like how boring is it to just have like a magical world where anything's possible and to make everyone human? It's like Star Wars, how everyone is just like, again, humans, and then you have like an occasional cool alien or something that's like Chewie, and it's like, but you could do so much more with that. Like you have endless possibilities. And so for me, it was kind of figuring out what sort of like lore and supernatural stuff I could pull from to kind of create these original beings. And it was a lot of fun. And I love this book so much. And I think I maybe mentioned this on the last time, but like Paranorthern was actually technically the first book I sold. It came out second, but like it was the first thing that I ever kind of sold. So it'll forever have like a really special place in my heart. So
no, it was great. And it was kind of interesting because there's a lot of diversity in there, but it's with the different types of magical beings. But it also is a mirror of our own reality. And so it was quite interesting seeing how the characters just take certain things for granted. And so what made them different was actually what brought them all together.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I really wanted to play with was having this world. But if you kind of think about like, again, like lore and mythology and superstition and stuff, everybody always kind of says for these fantastical things, it must have started somewhere, you know, like there's a kernel of truth in over the top stories. So it's like, if we have a world where multiple worlds and dimensions exist, what would bleed into that? Like, what could I play with in our world and put a spin on it for a new world? And playing around with not just, again, like the beings and the world, but the lore too. So.
And those incredibly cute bunnies are quite hilarious.
I was very, very pleased with those. That's like my love of Monty Python and the Holy Grail coming through.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's also like the hero's journey that you have, right? And not really knowing what your destiny is, but making mistakes along the way, trying to, right wrongs.
Yeah, like that's a really important lesson that I think young people need to learn, is that like it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to talk to people. And like Abby doesn't really talk to her mom because she doesn't want to burden her, but like she talks to her friends, she gets help, and they find the way together. And there's something really appealing about talking about that whole thing. Like, for instance, I don't know if you've watched Steven Universe, but I remember watching the first season of it when it was first airing. And there's this episode where Steven travels with the gems to another world and they mess up and this whole temple crumbles because they don't succeed in the mission. And it's kind of like a little bit like Steven's fault, but like nobody blames him for that. They're like, he's a kid. This was a mistake. This isn't the end of the world. This was temporary. It's fine. And it really stuck with me, like that kind of notion of making sure that kids know it's not that doesn't define you. You grow from your mistakes and we become the people we are based on the mistakes we make and what we learn. So yeah, like that was something I really wanted to play around with and incorporate into the story.
And because the intended audience for Paranorthern are younger readers, does that change how you go about crafting not only the themes and the messages in your work, but also then, how the characters interact? Because what you mentioned there is kind of like Spider-Man's with, great power comes great responsibility. And I'm a former teacher, so I totally understand with kids not wanting to make mistakes and not realizing that they're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to make mistakes. That's so when you get older, you can then, take what you've learned and apply it, as opposed to, making catastrophic mistakes when you're older.
Yeah. I think mistakes, especially when you're young, can seem really catastrophic, like you said, and they can be kind of villainized in a way. Like mistakes lead down a bad road. And it's like, this good and evil narrative that was really shoved down our throats as like young people. And sure, some things can be that simple and broken down, but like most things aren't. Like, it's not just black and white. There's like a whole kind of like spectrum in between that. And it's important that we experience those things, because like you can't just exist on this spectrum of one or the other. Not everything is exactly right or exactly wrong. And it's definitely just something that we have to kind of embrace. I think I've gone on a tangent and I forgot what the actual question was, but
no, your answer is great. It was more along the line, because now I'm gonna take what you're saying, but we'll get back to my original question,
okay,
right? Which was like how has writing for a young audience that kind of affected your creative process? But also, I want to stick with this because it's almost like that, like trying to be perfect, especially with the way the world is now, where you don't know what kind of lockdown you're going to be in next. You don't know about the virus, but that perfection sometimes leads to an anxiety that kind of is debilitating.
Yeah. And like Paranorthern, for instance, is definitely like a younger audience than this, but like young people have so much on their shoulders that we don't really take into consideration. If you think about it, you know, kids are expected to make decisions when they're in their like young to mid teens about what school they're going to go into, what's their career trajectory going to look like. And you know, not understanding anything about money, and they're going to go into these like loans to pay for school. And it's wild what we put on the shoulders of kids, and you know, the need for them to do well in school and have extracurriculars and all of these other things is wild. You know, I was really fortunate when I was younger, because like my parents wanted me to do well, but they didn't really super pressure me. And I always knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I always knew like I didn't want to go into like a field where I would require university. Like that was something that I learned about myself very, very young. So I wasn't overly concerned with grades. I did well enough, but like, you know, didn't like bend over backwards to basically try and do well in subjects that I didn't think would be a thing for me later on. And they really didn't. So that kind of played out in my favor. I know that's not always the case. And again, when we're young, we're expected to understand where we want our lives to go when we're not fully formed people. It's bananas.
Yeah,
so,
we're not even the same people. Like from 15 to 25, you're completely different.
Yeah. And I just think it's such a wild system. And, you know, kids always want to grow up so fast. And, you know, when you're like young, you want to be in high school because that's cool, or middle school. And it's always like this next thing. And the pressure just kind of mounts over time. And, you know, like, I think kind of, again, just like letting people know that it's okay to not know the future. It's okay to have mistakes. It's okay, all that stuff to go on and to have different paths along the way. You don't need to know what you want to do by the time you're 19. Like it's a lot. So I think like it's important to kind of just like have fun with stories and let them be an escape, and have like kind of subtle ways for young people to understand that, you know, it's okay. It's going to be okay.
It actually does, because I can tell you countless people, I'm sure in your walk of life as well too, maybe they go to university or college, wherever, and they realize halfway through, I'm going to switch my major because I don't even like this. Yeah. Right? Because they find their passion, their raison d'etre halfway through, right? You're developing your sense of self. You're breaking away from your parents. You know, you're experiencing new things. And like, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty, like for instance, like when I was finishing off my last couple of years of high school, I was like interning at a radio station, which was really cool. And I was like, oh, but this like small radio station has kind of like taught me everything. Like, why would I need to go to school for this? Like radio and music was kind of my passion, but like, I was like, why would I pay for this when actual professionals have taught me this? This seems weird. So I went to school for advertising and graphic design because I really liked art. And while I'm grateful for a lot of those courses now, you know, like typography kind of leads into lettering. And I took actual art courses, which gave me an eye for layouts and paneling and that sort of thing. All of those ultimately worked towards the person I am now, but I dropped out after a year because I wasn't passionate about it. And I knew graphic design wasn't a job I could see myself ultimately doing. So, I mean, again, I'm happy I had like some self-awareness early on to kind of step away from those things when I wasn't finding kind of joy or a path with them, but so many other people don't. And it's a bigger journey. And I mean, I ultimately wound up in like retail and all these like other kind of spirals for years. And you feel lost and aimless and like you're failing because there's just all these expectations on you.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I worked on a film earlier this year, and it was amazing how many industries are within a movie set. Yeah. And if And if kids knew, if there was some way that you can get industry to get into schools earlier, not just, what is kind of like the job fair week in high school, there are a lot of kids that would know from the time they're 12, that's an option. And we have societies where you have a lot of people either were born here or coming in as new immigrants, and their parents are bringing their own thoughts of what is viable as a career. Mm-hmm. And a lot of options are kind of closed off to a lot of kids because like, you can't do that because the parents have no idea that this is a viable profession. Yeah. So like, you're on a film set, you've got makeup, you've got art, you've got people who are doing carpentry, you have directors, you have camera people, you've got the director, there's almost like a city of jobs on this one project. It's unbelievable, almost like the opportunities that we're missing by not letting, the kids know that that's an option.
Yeah. And like, I think creative industries as a whole are largely like waved aside. Like I didn't really think that writing was an option for me until realistically not that long ago. And I'd always kind of been working on stuff for myself, but like the idea of making it a career, my parents again were like very good at like, do what makes you happy. But like the world largely kind of tells you no, that those aren't things. Nobody told me editing was a job. Nobody told me that like I could color things. Like nobody told me that all of these other avenues existed. Production exists, like there's all these different ways that are within the industries. And like you said, like contribute to it, but aren't those kind of like glamorized positions. And so many people step away from things that they love because they just, like you said, they don't understand everything that goes into it. And it's really a shame. We didn't really have like a lot of like career days. Like I've been doing like school visits and stuff and like library visits. And like, to me, it's like wild that somebody could have come in and told me these things as a kid and been like, did you know that these are like options? And like, not just for writers and stuff too, but like, film people and stuff, like that wasn't really a thing. Like my school did not have the budget for that sort of stuff. And I'm just like so envious of kids growing up these days who get these opportunities to connect with people who can change their lives. And I really just think there should be more of that. So
yeah, I totally agree. Now we can go back to the previous question. That was a great sidetrack. Yes, I love it. How is your creative process different now that you're doing a lot of YA stuff? How does that inform how you're going to, get your themes and your narrative on the page?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I prioritize story and the characters, and I make sure that they have like really solid arcs and journeys. I answer a lot of questions that I feel are important to get to know someone. It's like going on a date with like someone and being like trying to figure out what they like, what they don't like. But like you're building these characters and kind of just trying to figure out who they are. And I kind of think that themes come organically when you have characters and a story really fleshed out. So with that being said, in terms of writing for like a younger audience, I think when people think of writing for kids, they think they have to kind of like really like dumb things down a little bit. And like, that's not the case. Kids are extremely smart and they absorb a lot more of the world than we really like think sometimes, and it's important that what you're writing isn't condescending. They can pick up on themes and, big concepts. You look at like Raina Telgemeier's books, which really run the gamut and cover a ton of extremely tough topics. Like Ghosts, it's about a kid dying, and Raina just handles these books expertly. And like, she's one of the best-selling kids authors in the world currently, like I think she's the perfect example of how kids handle and absorb these big things if you can kind of put them in a story that they ultimately enjoy. And it's important to kind of make sure that the story again, is kind of put at the forefront, and you're not talking down to anybody, you know? So I think you certainly with like younger audiences, you can have a lot more fun. You can do a lot more like silly jokes and like dad jokes. Again, like there's like a pun in like the title of this. So
I want to get to that later because the humor, like I've been telling dad jokes before I was a dad. So I'm totally in love with a lot of the humor in this, especially the pumpkin humor and stuff. It's so great.
Yes. But like, you know, there's definitely a lot more room to be fun in that sense for younger audiences, where you can have fun with like older audiences too. I'm not saying people can't write funny books and all that. Like Ryan North is a great example of that. But, you know, like there's definitely more room to be silly and to kind of mix that in with the serious and kind of have that balance there. So, yeah, I don't know if that entirely answered the question, but, you know.
No, it's good. No, it's good because I think sometimes like, like when you get into a business and you realize how they make the sausage and you realize like, it's not just the creative process. There's like almost like a team and, you know, I guess the creator in you is like, I don't need a focus group and I don't need to have an end of my movie tested. Right. To get an audience reaction. And then either you refilm or reshoot something based on that. You just want to go ahead and tell your story. So what you're saying is I agree with you tell a story, you be authentic, and you know, whoever your audience is, whether they're young or old or in the middle, they're going to connect with it. And compelling characters first, and then have them do great stuff second, and then you've got them.
Characters are like the thing that I love, character driven stories. So, you know, you kind of write what you know, and then you elaborate on the things you want to do and the things you want to see. So I think it's like having a friend, you know, I'm like a lonely only child. And so characters and stories were my friends growing up. I used to like sit around and like in my room and play with like toys and imagine these worlds like based on books and stuff. So writing them is similar, you know, it's like having friends, but like I'm kind of crafting their narrative and steering that ship. And yeah. I'm still just a big kid.
I am too. I still laugh. A good buddy of mine from, this is probably back in the early 80s. We were big Star Wars fans, and it was after Empire, I think. And we went into his backyard and we created a base with all of our action figures. And it's funny now, like it made his mom really mad because we destroyed his mom's garden. We took the pipe and we like made tunnels and stuff. But it's funny because he now does sound work for film, right? And I do this stuff. So it kind of like it's almost like you're feeding what you need from an early age.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, you just reminded me, like yesterday was the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings. And me and my like high school friend would just like recreate Lord of the Rings scenes. But then also we were obsessed with this anime called Escaflowne.
Oh, Escaflowne. Right.
Escaflowne, it's so good.
Yeah.
But, like we used to recreate scenes in her backyard. And I remember like one time we were like playing with like sticks. I think we were doing like sword fights, and like one of them broke and like it got like this fat lip. And then like it's like, what happened? I was like, we're not going to talk about this, but I grew up to write. She's a doctor. So we went very separate ways, but
right.
You know, the heart of our nerdiness is still there.
But if you saw the Colbert rap,
yes, I'm
sure like all the memories would flood back for your friend as well too.
I know. I hadn't talked to her for a little while, and I sent her a message yesterday. I was like, happy holiday. Well, actually, I didn't say happy holidays first. I said happy Lord of the Rings 20th anniversary first, is what I said, to be honest. And then I said, also, if you don't hear from me before the holidays, happy holidays. But like, we definitely we have like Lord of the Rings, like code names for each other. And we like still send mail to each other as those names. Like our mailman must be like, who, what? So yeah, we're a little extra.
Excellent. And let's talk about the humor in Paranorthern. So you're a pretty funny individual, and I think that comes out in your writing. Do you have to sometimes like hold back? Because I know when I'm writing, sometimes I'm like, no, I'm gonna hold back on some of the puns.
Yeah, sometimes. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I super lucked out with the best editor in the world. I think Insha and I talked about her when we were on last time, but
Right.
Lily is like, again, I would take a bullet for her. I love her. And she's just like, but what about like more puns? And I'm like, marry me, like she's so great. But there is a give and take when you're trying to tell a story that does have like serious notes. Like it can't just be one note silly throughout, there's got to be levels and layers. So there's definitely moments where there's things that delight me that I think I put into like earlier drafts. Like I mentioned, the Monty Python thing. There was definitely like kind of more Monty Python references because of the bunnies and all this stuff. And like they kind of wound up being worked out of the story because my editor was like, this doesn't make sense. You've clearly just like put this in because it delights you. And it did. And I was very sad to cut it, but it was necessary for the story to kind of flow better. And yeah, I think there's moments when I look at like the scripts and like I'm trying to kind of like up things and kind of really add a little bit more humor. But you have to kind of know when. Like I've been working on another story with it just got announced a few weeks ago, actually. This is like the first time I'm talking about it on podcast or on what's it's stream show. I don't know what YouTube shows are called.
It'll be a podcast as well. So yeah.
Okay.
Streamcast.
Streamcast. Oh my gosh. But like working on that has been like all of the books have been fun in their own way, but this has been like over the top. Like it's set in Toronto. It's called Rack Pack. It's about like a heist, raccoons heisting this grocery store motherlode dumpster. And I had so much fun with my co-creator, Whitney Gardner, working on this story. And it was just like constantly adding jokes to it. Although there was like a couple moments when they were like, I think we need to take this out. There needs to be like at least like one serious moment in this scene. Like it's like, okay, fine. Yes. But like the jokes in it and like the fun we had, just kind of packing that all in there was a delight. So I think again, it depends on what the book is. It depends on what your story is. It depends on the characters. Because at the end of the day, if you're writing something that's character driven, you need to be true to who those characters are. And they can't all be like silly jokesters. If you look at like the dynamics of any friend group, like not every single one is the class clown, like that's extremely rare unless it's like a group of friends that all went to clown school, like that's right. Not usually the dynamic. Everyone has kind of a rule that evens the group out. So again, unless you're writing a book about clown school, you want that to kind of be balanced. So with Paranorthern, there's definitely things where I'm like, ooh, this could have been a funny little thing. But you hold back a bit. But Rack Pack definitely has so many puns and jokes. So yeah.
And can I mention or can I make the connection? Your love of Ocean's 11 and Rack Pack?
So Whitney and I have been sitting on this book news since like February, March of this year. And we sold this book to Simon & Schuster again, very early on in 2021, which was part of this roller coaster of good stuff. But then we had to sit on this for like 7-8 months and like not talk about it. And Whitney and I have no chill collectively. We definitely were like, how could we like long con promotional? Anyways, long story short, we started the Capercast, which is the heist podcast where we kind of decided to marry the research we were doing for the book with something that could eventually be not just, yes, it's a promotional tool, but we definitely just love talking to each other. And, this is like genuine research for us, and getting to discuss it with people that we thought would enjoy it is kind of, it's a fun way to do again, a long con of promotion and research.
And speak to, because I know you're really good at collaborating with other writers. What's it like working as a solo act and then working in a collaborative environment?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're writing solo, you have a lot more kind of say in that, but my agent, my editor both contribute. My agent gives feedback before we even submit something. If something doesn't work, I'm not like, push it through anyways. Like, she's like, no, my name's on this too. So like, no. So they keep me honest, and she gives me feedback, and so does an editor. And very rarely, I've never had somebody be like, wow, this first draft is perfect, let's just send it off to the copy editors. It always needs work. So working on like something solo is great in the sense that I can kind of just do stuff in my own time and, can just hunker down on things whenever. Collaborative projects obviously require a little bit more coordination, and communication is like my big thing, and I've been really fortunate to just work with people that I like adore as human beings. And so you work on these projects, and realistically, there's moments when any project that you're working on in a professional capacity is stressful, but these projects have largely been extremely, extremely fun because of the people that I work with. And I think it's really important when you go into a collaborative space that communication is like kind of the thing at the forefront. You need to know how the other person works. You need to know what kind of feedback they like, like with Whitney, for instance. I'm using Whitney. I know we're talking about Paranorthern, but this is like a fresh collaboration. So, we'd be texting each other, and it's like, hey, like, here's like the first draft of the script. Like, I'm still tweaking a couple things. So if you can make notes separately, so I don't kind of hyper focus on things as I'm finishing up, like, that'd be great. Then we can discuss. And, Whitney will send me like art and be like, okay, like, same thing. Like, let me know what you think. If there's like bigger notes, let's talk about them later on. And establishing how you best kind of respond to somebody and work with somebody and take feedback is really, really important. And I don't know that everyone always thinks of those things when they're going into, a project, because you might have like somebody who's a peer that's become your friend, but a lot of those relationships can go very bad if you aren't aware of how that friendship translates to a working relationship. So, with my collaborators, I'm very honest about, or I try to be very honest about, what kind of things bother me, or like, which things I prefer. And I ask them the same kind of stuff so that we can both be really comfortable, or all, depending on how many people are involved, all have a comfortable, safe space to talk about a project, which I think is really important, because sometimes you have to shoot people's ideas down, and vice versa. Sometimes they have to tell you no and keep you honest. And you really need to have a sense that it's not personal, and you're all trying to make the best story possible. So I think communication is just like the like holy grail of collaborations.
That, and I think being able to manage egos, like if you can kind of get through it without ego, then I think it makes it that much easier.
Yeah. And I think there's always like a level of sadness for like a hot second, depending on what it is. If somebody's like that doesn't work, right? And it's like, oh, because like you put heart into it, or if it's something that you're particularly attached to, again, like a bad joke, like it can hurt for like a hot second, but then you have to be like, do I want to push back on this and have a discussion, or is it genuinely better with this feedback? And you have to be able to separate that side of things and like kind of not respond like instinctively. Like you have to kind of sometimes take a step back and be like, okay, am I upset about this because I was delighted by this very silly thing, or, so it's definitely important to set those aside and just try to make the best story possible and understand that that's what your collaborators want too.
So when you think about all the hats you've worn in your career, and you're now on Paranorthern, and you're talking to your agent, has your time as an editor helped you not only see both sides of the creative process, but also the business aspect of it too, when you have to take things out or add things?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think every editor I work with, I take something from. I've again talked about Lily a lot, but like she's just like so good at delivering that like critique sandwich, the hamburger, where she knows how to talk you up and make you feel good, but then deliver the stuff that's like hard to kind of like digest, but then bring it back to, the parts that you kind of really need to work on. And her and other editors that I've worked with each have different approaches to how they tackle projects. And I do too. But for writing, for editing, for everyone I ever work with, there's always something that I take from those experiences and try to apply to be a better creator going forward. And I think that should ultimately be the goal for everybody. We should always grow as creators and take things to make us better. But yeah, I definitely, I think there's moments when there's like, I'm working on a pitch, for instance, which I will not go into, but like, I'm working with a really excited artist that I adore, and they're so excitable and wonderful and lovely, but they'll be like, but like this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, like we need to focus this. And they're like, but I want to have this person too. And I'm like, yeah, but like, I know that editors and agents will not go for this. Like the focal point has to be here. And I feel like a buzzkill sometimes because like I know I understand that side of what they're looking for. So I feel kind of crummy. So I'm having to rein in that excitement, but I'm like, we won't get anywhere with this being, this. And so it does kind of like suck to be the party pooper from time to time, but I think it also helps to not waste time too. We're doing something that, like, for instance, like YA stuff, if you're writing for like a YA audience and you have adult protagonists, like that's a really hard sell, so you have to think about the audience, who the characters are, and there's so many different factors that kind of go into building a pitch, building a story, getting that story sold, etc. So it does help, but it also, kind of stinks. And then like with projects that I work on with, again, Lily, who I am clearly obsessed with, I can hear her voice in my head when I work on projects for her. Like she's always like, but what's the timeline? How much time has passed? What? And anytime I'm writing something for her and I shift like a week or a day or something, I have to write it down now because I know she's going to ask. I know she's going to want to know. But that's like something that now I do for all of my projects. I make like timelines. I make all these things that I know might come back and bite me in the ass eventually. So yeah, I think ultimately you take from each experience and you try and apply that to you as a whole and hope that it doesn't turn you into like a really like pedantic, like technical person. You hope that kind of you take all of these things and the creativity still comes and it just makes you ultimately, hopefully, a better creator, hopefully.
Yeah, totally. And I'll use it. I think it was a line that a guitarist, a guy named George Benson, he's a famous jazz guitarist, and they asked him something about, playing guitar, and he's a master. And he says, I'm still learning. Right. And I think he's probably in his 80s, 70s or 80s. And when you think of someone at that stage, that level, played with some like jazz giants, still thinking that they are not anywhere near a master of their craft and they're always trying to figure stuff out, it just shows you that no matter what level you're at, there's always more to take in and more to kind of learn.
Yeah, the world is always evolving. The world is changing. Storytelling is changing. And it applies to music too. There's new albums released, there's new genres that kind of get explored. And all of those things are stuff that you need to take into consideration when you want to kind of create. And, maybe I don't want to write like a horror series or something like for adults, but being open to that idea, playing with short stories in that genre and for those audiences, even if it's just something for me, still allows me to learn something and to explore different things and to understand how tension works and how building atmosphere through whatever works. And I think it's really important that we don't close ourselves off to different things, like whether it's, again, as a musician and it's like different genres, different styles, all this stuff. And the same again applies to writing and editing. There's lessons to be learned across the board that you can take to not necessarily even be better, but just continue to grow and to incorporate. And I hope I never get to a point where I'm like, I've learned everything I can ever learn. I don't think that I would ever be like that, but I sincerely hope that somehow that doesn't turn into who I am, because I like growing. I like learning. I like pushing myself to step outside my comfort zone. And I think everyone should do that. So
it's like when you go to a concert and the artist wants to have their new album played, but the fans want their old stuff. They want the hits. But as that artist, I get it. You want to hear the hits. But as the artist, you're like, I want to keep growing. Look at this new stuff I'm making. And there's that balance that you have to achieve.
I know. And, like I mentioned very briefly that I did a self-published thing with Megan Huang earlier this year that was put out by Toronto Comix. It started as a backup series for the Image Comics series I was editing, Tartarus, with Johnny Christmas and Jack T. Cole. And Megan and I decided that we wanted to do a collected version of it. But my point with that is it's very different from other things that I've done. It's a sci-fi book that's kind of focused on nature. It has no words in it whatsoever. It's completely silent. And I think I wanted to explore playing with sci-fi. I love watching and reading sci-fi stuff, but I hadn't done a ton myself. So, kind of playing around with that and imagining these far off worlds. It really isn't that different from fantasy. It's just kind of playing with slight tweaks. But I think as a writer, it's not just enough to kind of play with genres. Sometimes too, you have to challenge yourself and like doing something where your scripts are essentially just art direction and trusting your collaborator to be able to pull that off and knowing they can kind of do that if you let them, and listening to feedback and all this stuff. Megan's phenomenal. Like, she's such an incredible creator. And that was such a rewarding and amazing experience to get to work on that with her and to have it be released. And yeah, I'm really proud of that one. I kind of like weirdly, that happened like in such a whirlwind, like, and I kind of forget that it exists sometimes. But like, again, I don't want to ever get comfortable,
Right. And speaking of not being comfortable and, how things can change, considering how the year started and where you are now, can you please speak to how, I guess this is the cherry on top of your year, being nominated for an award. Did I read correctly?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things kind of like we got nominated. Paranorthern. So myself and Mari got nominated for a Silver Birch Fiction Award, which is part of the Forest of Reading.
Absolutely.
And I'm floored. We got like a call from the like awards people, and I almost didn't answer the phone because like it wasn't a number I like recognized. But I hate having messages like voicemails more than I hate just picking up and hanging up if it's like, you know,
a bot or something. Yes.
Exactly. And it was like, hello. like really cagey. And I was having like this weird day, and she was just like, congrats, you'd want to know, like, you've been nominated for this award. And I was like, what? And at first, again, I would think I was like skeptical, because it's like, congrats, you've won a free night at the Marriott. And I'm like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I remembered that Paranorthern's distributed by Rain Coast Books in Canada. Wonderful, wonderful group of people. And my PR person there, Fernanda, she's wonderful. She had messaged me a few weeks earlier and had been like, so like, what would your phone number be if, like, say somebody needed to contact you for like an award? And I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, yeah, sure, here's my number. I thought she was just kind of like submitting my information. But that kind of like went through my head, and I was like, sneaky, you're sneaky. And then she emailed me too and was like, I've sat on this for like a month and I fell off my chair when I found out. I was so excited. So yeah, there's a lot of really great titles in there with Paranorthern. I'm truly not expecting to win, but it's incredible to just be amongst all of these amazing other creators. And I'm just really like blessed and thankful for that. It's just like,
it's one of those kind of markers that lets you know that you're on the right path.
Yeah. And I just, again, this story is really deeply personal to me. And like it means a lot to me. Again, it was my first thing that I ever sold, and not to get like too like sentimental here, but like I had a death in my family recently, but that person was the person that my parents encouraged me to read to very strongly. They'll say that, but we didn't have a lot of money. And this relative would always give me like a gift certificate for the bookstore. So every Christmas I'd have a little bit that I could go spend. And she lived really close to the Yonge and Eglinton Indigo. And after I'd visited her in 2018, I went to go to that Yonge and Eglinton Indigo that I'd kind of like grown up buying books in. And that was when my agent called and told me that we sold Paranorthern.
Nice.
And so I was like having a meltdown in this store and just like dancing and like doing this whole thing. And I'm sure they thought I was absolutely nuts, but you know, it like for this to kind of be that book that is getting kind of some recognition and that people are really like resonating with, it's just, it makes me really happy. And it has like this nice connection to this relative that I've just like lost. And like, but I always know that like I have that as like something that now connects me in this meaningful way. So I don't know if it makes sense. But
oh, it does. It does. There's like, I don't believe in coincidences, and certain things happen just because they're meant to be, good or bad. Mm-hmm. And what you just explained is just the universe unfolding as it's, you know, kind of meant to.
Yeah. So it's really, really nice. And this book again is just like, it's got so much of like my personality in there. Like, again, like, oh my God, it's Insha and myself. And right. We both really come through in the story there. But what this is, you know, my humor and like my dialogue. And yeah, although I will say, I don't know if it's like forced of reading, but like I'm doing like a couple kids things next year. And like, I'm doing stuff with Canadian Book Week.
Okay.
And so I'm part of like the author roster for the 2022 Book Week. And somebody changed my bio on the site from, it was like one of the people there. It's kind of funny, but like I wrote that I'm like in my bio that I'm a like lover of puns. And somebody changed it to Stephanie likes to tell bad jokes. And I was like, the audacity.
Wow.
Rude.
Just a little bit judgy, a little bit.
Right? It was like, this is very rude. It's funny.
Puns are a high art. They're a high art.
They are. Also, I do have a game called Punderdome, which is like a card game, and it brings me a lot of joy.
Nice. Is it a Mad Max kind of reference or?
Yeah, like it's like, I'll tell email you, like, I'll send you like a shot of it later. But yeah, I don't play a lot of like board games these days because I don't hang out with anybody. But yeah, and I'm like the only one that's ever just like, yeah, puns. But still, again, your friends, they have levels.
Absolutely, for sure. And so I just want to, because we're on a bit of a personal tangent here, on your Twitter feed, you had mentioned ADHD is something that is a part of your life. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I've kind of for a long time known that I've had ADHD. Like there was like less than 0% chance I had ADHD. And I'd kind of talked to my parents about it over the years, and it wasn't diagnosed the same way as it is now. And it was really hard to find in kids, especially young girls. And my parents thought that was something that was maybe I could benefit from some help from, but we were never able to get like a formal diagnosis. And so I kind of just went through the years thinking that my hyperactivity and my lack of focus, and I don't know if you've noticed that I like to talk a lot, but all of these things like were actually just a part of this ADHD. So recently in the last several months, I quit my job. I've been doing freelance full time. And it's one thing when you're kind of working on projects for yourself to kind of do things in your own time, and as long as you're making the deadlines and that sort of thing. But I've been doing some other projects for other people, and occasionally like the focus, it just gets really hard to kind of stay on track. And I realized as much as I've kind of already weaponized this for my greater good, I maybe needed to kind of find some help in discussing that and maybe looking into like some options for like medication. So I've been doing therapy, sorry, to kind of manage the anxiety component that kind of came with, it came with me. And I think it's also a little bit of a byproduct of my ADHD as well. And yeah, recently I've been trying to kind of explore getting that diagnosis. So I did that like last month with my doctor. And she walked me through getting that and how we could kind of the options basically. So yeah, I've recently started to kind of better manage that through medication, and it's been great-ish so far. Like it's definitely working, but I like now then get really focused on the things that if I'm kind of already doing something when like the medication kicks in, that's the thing I get real focused on.
Right. You zero in on it.
Yeah. So it's definitely playing around with my routine and making sure that I'm understanding how it affects my body. That I think will kind of make or break whether that works for me. I know a lot of people like me just kind of let it pass for the years because, even in Ontario, when we have healthcare, it can be really expensive to get like an official professional diagnosis from like an ADHD clinic. But a lot of doctors, they went to medical school and they studied these things, and depending on their comfort level, might be able to kind of walk you through those things too and do assessments without you having to pay like $2,000-$3,000 to see somebody to do a professional ADHD assessment. Like they're familiar enough, if they're comfortable with it and familiar enough, your family doctor can help. And that's kind of the route I went as somebody who doesn't have benefits, and OHIP doesn't cover that. So
life of a freelancer.
Yes. So I'm really grateful that my doctor was able to talk to me about it and to take me seriously and not to kind of just like brush off my concerns, which can be, hard. Sometimes doctors are like overworked, especially during a pandemic, and they can just be like, yeah, you're fine. You know what? Like do some yoga, take something or whatever.
Right.
And, she's been really great in kind of making sure that I feel that I can function, as best as I possibly can. So yeah, it's again, just kind of the start of like the official journey for me. But I highly recommend, if it's within your capabilities and you think you are struggling with ADHD or something else, to talk to a doctor. Even if you can't afford a specialist, a family doctor, even at a walk-in, might be able to help you and give you some advice that could really be life-changing for you. So,
Oh, for sure. And especially with the time that we're living in, with how uncertain everything is.
yes.
I'm sure it must be quite an adjustment. And then also for how it would affect you creatively.
Yeah, so far it's been pretty good. Like again, I'm just kind of starting out, so I can't kind of go into it super deeply here, but it's again kind of just trying to figure out, like I have a journal and I've been chronicling like my moods and like what kind of it does to me before and after, so that I don't just kind of get settled in and not realize the pros and cons of what it's doing, so my doctor again is really great, and we're going to do a follow-up and basically go through those things and discuss whether that's a good fit for me, whether there's a different dosage, whether there's other options. So yeah, I'm definitely like doctor hesitant sometimes, and I put it off a lot. But after having like a few friends who are also like comic creators get diagnoses and start their medication, like it's just made me feel comfortable with trying. I think the concern is like, oh, my brain's going to shut up. It's not going to work the same way. It's not going to be as creatively driven. I'm not going to be able to process things the same way. And I think it's all levels, right? It depends on what you're on. It depends on how your body is taking things. It depends on all of these things that are, you'll only really know if you try. But, I think it's always putting yourself first and kind of trying to do the things that will help you better survive this kind of roller coaster of a world. Give yourself your best chance of succeeding and being happy and being your version of successful, not other people's version of it, which I think is a very important distinction. But I can't recommend making sure you talk to people about things that you're experiencing enough and seeking out help whenever possible.
Right. Definitely. I think the big takeaway I have from COVID is that isolation is not a human, it's not something that we are supposed to be in.
Right.
And so by not talking, by not sharing, by not being around others, you put yourself in a situation that's not the healthiest. And I
Right.
think the more that we talk, the more that we're able to share what's going on inside, it just helps our mental health, as well as builds our sense of community.
Yeah, I agree. And, I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about therapy and stuff. And if that's not right for you, that's not right for you. But I think it's really important that you have somebody at the bare minimum in your life that, calls you on your BS and is there for you when you need someone to talk to, and is like objectively just able to listen and can kind of be like, I saw this online like a little while ago and I love it, where you vent to somebody and then they respond with, do you want solutions or do you want somebody to just listen? And I think
Right.
it's really important to have a friend who knows when to offer step up and when to just kind of be someone you can lean on. And yeah, I'm really fortunate with my friend group. I definitely am a hermit. I definitely really leaned into that during COVID. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't remember how to talk to people. But I'm really, really fortunate to have a lot of great friends, but a few especially that I know I can come to with pretty much anything. And, they'll be there to listen or be like, you're being irrational and bonkers or whatever. We all need that.
Absolutely.
can't just have people that are just like, yes, you go. Like, that's great. I love cheerleaders, but also if I'm being ridiculous, please somebody hold me accountable to that. Cause like I've said, I don't want to ever get comfortable in my life. I want to be a better person. I want people to tell me if I'm doing something toxic, you know?
You actually put that into Paranorthern, right? Because Abby's support group, her crew, at different points, they're all there for each other, right? But because she's the central character, you see how all of her friends in their own way support her and then also push her at different times in the story.
Yeah. And a lot of those voices, I mean, I wrote that like that, but deliberately, but those are also really inspired by a lot of my personal friends and the voices. It's like, how would this friend respond to me if like this was like me saying this? Like, how would, you know, this be this? And, or how would they tackle this? How would they talk to Abby? Not me. I'm not a self-insert in this, but you know, like, I think it's important to kind of think about those people in your life, and to make realistic dialogue and voices, you have to draw from different people that you know, or else it's just like one note. And I really try my best to kind of like not, you know, steal directly from people, but find inspiration in the people that I admire and the people who have like kind of strong personalities that I think fit these characters, and asking how would so-and-so do this or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, again, you have to have, most people again have friend groups with levels like Paranorthern, again, unless the clown school thing, but yeah, finding those people that accept you for who you are and love you regardless. You know, that takes us a really long time sometimes to find in our lives, but you like hold on to them dearly when you do find them. And yeah,
they're rare gems. So with 2021 coming to a close, what can we look forward to from you in 2022?
Yeah, so there's definitely more Oh My Gods coming out. We have Oh My Gods 2, The Forgotten Maze, which will arrive in April. I don't know the exact date, April 2022. So I've got that going on. I've been writing a video game also.
Wow.
I feel like I've really glazed over several things that I've been doing this year, but I've been writing a video game for a Toronto-based game developer called Kid & Cup Studio. So it's a game called Pico, and it's a tea making simulator that takes place in a town populated by cats. So it's a delight. It's going to be on Steam. You can find it there. And I'm writing that right now. That should be out in 2022, although I don't know exactly when. We're working on that. I think kind of summer-ish. So I have that coming out. I have been editing for a couple of really cool projects. And hopefully I'll either be able to announce those or be able to share more about those very, very soon. Definitely there'll be a couple coming out in 2022. I just don't know when. So lots of cool things on the horizon. I'm doing like wearing a bunch of different hats, I guess you could say. The video game is like really, really fun and gets to kind of scratch a different itch, I suppose. And it's been an absolute blast to work on. Like, honestly, this entire year has been like me writing about cats, animals, and raccoons. Like, and I can't say anything more too, but like I was in like a call yesterday and like got an offer for like another like pet related thing. And I was like, yes, is this my brand now? It's like, oh, so yeah, I'm very excited.
That's great. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you again. Best of luck moving forward and good luck with the nomination.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me back. You are wonderful. I loved that segue right back to Paranorthern. You are very good at what you do. And
thank you.
This was great.
All right, great. Awesome. Thanks again.